To welcome everybody to the January 10th meeting of the Miami Pioneers and Natives of Dade and friends. And we've got a wonderful program set today. We have with us Marlin Ebbert, who made a wonderful documentary with the Munroe boys, talking about what it was like to grow up at the Barnacle. And I guess one of our favorite things of all is to hear from people from their own stories of growing up in South Florida. And so we are so lucky. Let me introduce Marlin. Marlin, if you give us an introduction of yourself and Bill, and tell us a little bit about this project and how it came to be. And then together we'll all watch the movie, and then we'll have a discussion after that. And doesn't mind just putting their audio on mute while we're doing the program. That would be fantastic. I appreciate that. Thanks so much. Okay, so Marlin, take it away.
Well, hi, everybody. I moved to South Florida in 1988, and my older daughter was at Gables High School and met Charlie Munroe's younger daughter, Mary Munroe. Anyway, I met Charlie and Mimi Munroe very quickly and found out about the Barnacle, and I've always loved historic homes. And I remember taking my parents there the first Christmas that we lived here, and it just became a very soft spot. I had been to Vizcaya. Somehow the Barnacle just spoke to me much more so than a place like Vizcaya. And through the years, I became active at the Barnacle, and I've served as president and been on the board numerous times. And I always have liked to visit historic homes when I've been out of town, and very rarely do you have an opportunity to hear from somebody that's actually lived in the house. And often houses are sold, have interim owners, furniture changes, but not so with the Barnacle. The Barnacle went right from being a home to the Munroe family to the state of Florida. And so it was a unique opportunity. And I had listened to Bill and Charlie reminisce about growing up, and I just thought other people would enjoy hearing it too. I had never done anything like this before. I've never done anything like this since, but I just thoroughly enjoyed it, and it was a wonderful project. So take it away, Bill. Do you have anything you want to add?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I enjoyed watching the last one with John Nort, and so I volunteered to kick in on this one. You may notice here that I come under the name of Irene Munroe, and down in the lower left corner, you'll see when it says William Munroe. That's my son in LA, California. He snuck in there.
You look at him with the palm trees in the background, living large, huh?
Yes, I was going to do that trick too, but you'll see another one over here too. Joyce has one too. Anyway, I look forward to answering any questions we have, and it's on with the show. All right, thank you.
Okay, what I'll do is I'll hit a few buttons here and attempt to share my screen with the video, and then we'll all watch it, and then we'll have a discussion afterwards. So wish me luck. I'm going in.
Hi, my name is Marlin Ebbert, and right after I moved here in 1988, I discovered the Barnacle and
You've lost audio.
yeah. I think we need to.
Their memories. It was a paradise.
Is that better?
It was a world all its own. It really was.
But we didn't know it. I didn't, and I just took it for granted. Doesn't everybody grow up like this?
I imagine that it was absolutely heaven. Just being in South Florida and all this wonderful, beautiful weather and the view of the bay and being able to have the bay as your playground, your front yard.
Well, Bill, I'm always amazed that, we talk to people about the front of the house and the back of the house. We look at it, and of course, that's the front of the house, the waterfront and the front lawn and the front of the house. And I don't know when they put in main highway, but
Long before our day.
long before our day.
The Barnacle was built in 1891 by Ralph Middleton Munroe, Bill and Charlie's grandfather. The house stayed in the family for 82 years. The boys were young when World War II broke out.
We were pretty small, but World War II did affect us.
It was on a Saturday, and we were eating lunch at the Biscayne Bay Yacht Club, which was almost adjacent to the Coast Guard station. And these were all amphibious planes, and they would launch in the water and go off, and there's a lot of activity going on, and they would leave, and then we figured out they were leaving with a bomb underneath each wing, and when they came back, the bombs weren't there, and so we figured something was going on, and the next day, the Miami Herald said, oh, they sunk a German submarine down off Key Largo.
The black crude oil that came out of that ship covered all the beaches, and all the waterfront here was covered with it, the boats and everything. It was a mess.
They saved that in cans and buckets, and they would pave the driveway by pouring that tar on the driveway to keep the dust down.
The property was a grand playground.
I love playing in the woods. I mean, I pretended I was Tarzan or something to that effect, but I also love the waterfront. And so we had two different worlds to play in. This is the hammock that I used to play Tarzan in.
I imagine it was a paradise, the kind of childhood that many children dream of, playing pirates and all the games that children played all over the rest of the country and the world, but playing it surrounded by tropical vegetation and beautiful wildlife, lizards, parrots, and all manner of interesting people.
One such interesting person, George Sands from the Bahamas, came to live with their grandfather and later helped raise the boys.
George Sands was, almost a surrogate father to some extent.
And he was just here when we grew up, and he was with us, I guess, until mid-50s when he passed away.
And the school was unique in the fact that it was school from Tuesday to Saturday noon. So we didn't go to school on Monday, and then went to school for half a day on Saturday. So we only went to school 4.5 days a week.
My grades weren't the best, and so the folks decided to,
Don't ever admit that.
oh, I'm sorry, that maybe the Ransom School, which was just starting back up again, and graduated from that high school there, fifth in my class, out of 5.
This whole path used to be guava trees. This is where we got all our guava from making guava jelly. That was kind of fun.
Mother made guava jelly, loads of it, bottle after bottle.
In fact, Katrina's office was always known as the jelly room, but now it's her office today.
Bill's favorite memories took place on the water.
Really spent most of my time on the waterfront. So it was probably to do with boats and that sort of thing, sailing. It was just, we had boats to paint and boats to sail.
Boats to bail out.
That's true. I spent a lot of hours in this boathouse building boats. I built a couple of small boats in here, 17-foot skiff and so outboard skiff. I spent a lot of time upstairs, supposedly studying, but that didn't do too well. There's the egret, granddad, copy of the egret that granddad built. There's this communication boat before there were roads. Back in the days when he worked as a wrecking agent for ships ashore on the reef.
The property hasn't changed much since their grandfather, Ralph Munroe, lived there.
The cottage we grew up in was situated right here where the pavilion is today. And it was a two-bedroom, 1-bath cottage.
1945 hurricane. It literally just kind of washed right through it.
It had floated away on 2 previous occasions into the neighbor's yard. So my grandfather brought it back, and this time he built 4 big concrete planters on each corner of the house.
We moved to this house in 1940, Bill, is that something?
Yes, after my grandmother, who was living here, died. We moved from the cottage down on the bayfront up here.
And do you remember crawling out from underneath there, Bill, from the
Oh, yes, we crawled under the house. We'd go in through
pantry? The
the
pantry. and the kitchen.
pantry and crawl around under the house. And one time we came out here, yes.
So the house is definitely built up off the ground. Yes, it's a little claustrophobic when they did that. Bill, remember when you used to put that on your head and the chiggers would get out of there and
The
start
bugs would
biting your
make
head?
you itch something terrible.
Here, try it again.
No way.
Coconut Grove was a tiny little village, and everything in that village was what we needed. We never went to Miami to do anything except my mother took us down there one time to buy a coat or something because it was 5 miles away and we seldom drove to Miami.
They could walk outside and they knew their neighbors well. There were stores all around. The playhouse was going. I mean, all of these things were going on. So I think for them, it wasn't that great of a change from how it had been from, say, when Ralph Munroe was living here.
Rayleigh Milan's was a hardware store, and that was always intriguing to me. I remember buying something and coming home with it. It was a little headlamp that you could put on you and battery powered. And I got it home, and my mother questioned me about what I was going to do with that, and talked me into returning it.
She was after us all the time. Get your elbows off the table. No, don't use your fork like that. So that was all part of the mom's doing for us.
And of course, I didn't appreciate it at the time, but now I realize that she really enforced some good manners on us. Now, Bill, if you'll get a broom and start sweeping the floor. My mother would stay up at night until I got home. And she always determined when I got home because I would step on that step right there and it would creak. And so that would wake her up and she knew I was home. So then I got to the point where I always missed that step.
They spent their summers in North Carolina. It took a day and a half to get there by train.
Because we rode the train up, we didn't have a car there. And so she would literally walk down to the little country store and buy the groceries. And she had a pair of blue jean coveralls. And then she loaded the legs up with canned goods and food and everything else like that. And then she hung it over her shoulders and walked back up the hill.
Their father, Worth, followed in his father's footsteps and was a boat designer.
He was always in his office or down at the boathouse. He always would seem very relaxed. I mean, my mother was the spark plug, the driver in the family.
Well, I think Bill and Charlie's mother and father had a really big part of creating who they are and giving them the love of the land and having them keep the flame growing. Mary Munroe definitely was the keeper of the flame. She guarded everything, even from her children. She guarded everything, and that's why we have so much to document the Barnacle and the Munroe family today.
Bill and Charlie's grandfather was also a ship salvager. The habits of recycling and reusing passed down through the generations.
These are the old tiles that came out of the Royal Palm Hotel when they tore that place down, or were they scrap pieces left over? I don't remember what.
When they tore it down about 1926, I believe it was, Grandpa got in there and collected all he could. Reused them here to make this patio, and we saved everything.
That was the key because there wasn't a drugstore. There was a hardware store to go buy it at.
In the old days before we arrived,
But that habit hung on.
it still does today. I've got more junk and I know what to do with it.
Well, Bill, tell us about the punt.
The punt was built here in this boathouse by my grandfather. It was intended or built as a tender for his 26-foot sailboat, the last sailboat he had, to carry on deck. Even though she was shoal draft, when he anchored out, he didn't want to get his feet wet to get ashore, so he built this little light boat that he could carry on deck. And when I was about 8 years old, my dad gave it to me as my first boat. Kept it all these years, and I've had it tucked away, and finally I decided I'm not using it anymore. Like the last time I used it was to help tie up my sailboat for Hurricane Andrew. So I decided it was time to bring it home to the Barnacle.
Bill, I noticed that you didn't line up the screw heads properly, right, with the slot in them, and you've got some Phillips head and a slot head.
Now you're giving away my secrets.
This beautiful quilt was made by Bill's wife, Irene. a fabric artist, using Mrs. Munroe's well-worn sheets. Irene dyed them, cut them, and stitched them into this Seminole pattern to preserve for future generations. She named it Mama Sheets. The House of the Three Sisters is another good example of recycling and reusing. It sat on the property and was built from lumber salvaged from a ship named the Three Sisters.
Used as a storeroom when we grew up, and it finally got in such deplorable condition, and Dad said we had to tear it down. So we all did it right there ourselves.
But the photograph I have of it shows people standing on the porch of the house, so somebody must have lived there. The well, the freshwater well was still operable.
The well, yes.
Oh, the well.
This was here when Grandpa bought property, the 40 acres. I assume it was dug by the Indians, used it, I believe, and the local people would come here and get fresh water. Back in those days, the canals and rivers hadn't been dredged through the Coral Ridge that goes along the coast here. So the Everglades had about 3 feet more elevation in water, creating a head. And the water would run through the limestone and flow into this well and down into the bay.
So my first idea of conditioned air was my mother had a baby blue porcelain tub
For washing the baby in.
for wash me, maybe him. But then they'd go get a big block of ice and set it in the tub and put a fan on it and blow the cold air. Of course, wasn't the dry air, it was wet air, but it was cooling.
When we lived here, there were screened porches. The upstairs porch was all screened in. And we spent a lot of time there in the summers when it was hot. Yeah. And sometimes we'd sleep out there. It'd be cool. There being no air conditioning, of course.
The holidays were always special at the Barnacle.
There's always a big celebration here
For Thanksgiving.
and Christmas. In the dining room, there was a table it was a round table would stretch out where you could seat 27 or 30 people around it. And the room was full. We'd go out west of
Missouri Road, pretty much.
Missouri Road and south of Dixie Highway and part of the early developments of Gables, where they put pink sidewalks in and paved streets, but there were very few, if any, houses. But in between the sidewalks and the roadways were pine trees, young pine trees. So we go out till we find one we like and cut it off, put it on top of the car and bring it home.
Boating and the waterfront were always a big part of their lives, and still are today. The Comanche was built for a friend in 1956, but today it's back in the family.
My dad spent many hours designing this boat. I was lucky enough to work as a draftsman for him, part-time on that. And then when the design was finished, I went to work with the builder, and 3 of us built the boat in 6 months. And I got to go in the first race with it, which we won. But later on, when Jack Price decided he wanted to do something different, get another boat, we talked Charlie's father-in-law into buying it because he was ripe for a new boat. So that's how I got That's how I got back into the family, or into our family.
Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. Taxes on the property were skyrocketing, and it was time to make a decision.
And we just couldn't really afford to hang on to it. And Dad didn't want to part with it, so we waited till after he passed away and finally let it go to the state of Florida.
In the meantime, the developers were all over my mother. Don't you want to sell? We could make this the clubhouse, build some high-rise apartments around it. And she didn't have any part of that.
Because of the efforts of local historian Arva Moore Parks and then Florida State Senator Bob Graham, the Barnacle was saved, and today is a 5-acre state park unlike any other. This is the last photo of the family taken by the boathouse on the day of the sale in 1973.
And this, of course, is in memory of our mother, Bill.
Yes.
Yeah, Mary Poor Monroe, beloved wife of Worth Monroe, 40-year resident of the Barnacle. Wow. Frangipani tree, pretty pink. She loved it.
And next to it is one in memory of our Aunt Patty, who was part owner and grew up here, born and grew up here.
My hopes and dreams that it stays like it is. And literally, when you walk down the driveway,
time after time, when I'll bring a friend down here, they say, wow, really is a step back in time, isn't it? And it is.
When you leave Main Highway, you're leaving behind the 21st century, and every step brings you closer to the past. I live above the office in the old carriage house, and I wake up every morning excited to get downstairs.
It is an absolute piece of our past that there's nothing else like it.
I'm happy to see it carry on as it is. It's fun to come back here and reminisce a little. And I try still involved in the waterfront. It is great to be here. And there's so many functions. The place is really busy as a park. And to have it hidden right here inside the big city and so active, it's good. Well, it was a great life, and due to times it's passed on for us as far as living here, but we're glad it's here.
Thank you for watching, and thank you to the villagers and to everyone else who funded this film.
Marlin. Thank you.
Well,
I say bravo. Nice
well,
job.
I hope people will watch it again on your site because the music was gone. There was a little bit of a shake to it. Did you notice that, or was that just for me?
I didn't see that here, but I couldn't tell what anybody was seeing. I muted my computer for a minute there, but I realized that turned off the audio. So
Okay, but you know, it was a little off for me. But if anybody has time again ever, they might want to watch it again. So, but I hope you enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
okay, so why don't we talk about? Let's take some questions and stuff. Marlon, why don't you give us a little bit of a background first of all on how you came about to do this project, and who helped you, and how that went. Can you start with that?
Well, I had it was really one day I was asked to come to the Barnacle. It was during the downturn in the economy in maybe 2008 or 2009. And what people don't realize about the state park system in Florida is that the way they get their money for the state parks is not only through their gate admission, but also it's related to real estate sales. When there's a real estate transaction, there's a stamp tax, and somehow through the state of Florida gets a portion of that stamp tax. And when there isn't a lot of real estate sales, the money goes down. And the governor at the time, I think it was Charlie Crist, was threatening to sell off some of the state parks and that weren't making big money, like Cape Florida State Parks, you know, some of the passive parks like the Barnacle. And one of the television stations, I think it was NBC, wanted to do a story on that. And I was asked to come down and be part of that. And Charlie Munroe was there for the day. They didn't want to hear anything from me. They only wanted to hear from Charlie because he was reminiscing about growing up there. And they were just fascinated with all of his stories. And so that kind of planted a seed. And so I went to the villagers. I've been a villager since I moved here. And they gave me, they awarded me a grant. And the villagers don't give you the money, they pay your bills, which is a very smart way to do it. And they give it to you for 2 years, and they gave me $3,000. First year I did nothing. Second year, I thought, well, I better do something. So I started to ask around, and having never done anything like this before. And a film had been made about the Barnacle, about the Commodore, and about how the Barnacle came to be. And I watched that, and I felt that I still had a different story to tell. But I went to those people that had made that film. And they said to me, well, how much money do you think you can raise? And I said an amount, and they said, we'll do it. I think they loved the park. They loved the Munroe family. They loved Katrina Bowler, who's the park manager, and they were just really willing to do it. So it all sort of just came together. And they operate out of Coral Springs. So I had to go up to their house repeatedly. They had all the equipment in their home, and putting together a documentary it was really a wonderful experience. Splicing, adding music, adding the narrator, picking the narrator, and so it was. And then, Bill, we had a party at the Barnacle when you and Charlie came back from North Carolina that year and had the movie.
Yes.
So that's how it came to be. So
That's a great background story. So, Bill,
Yes.
would you like to entertain some questions from our guest about growing up at the Barnacle?
I'd be happy to. There are lots of extra tales to be told on a few you heard there on the film. So any questions? Let's hear them.
Okay, anybody want to ask a question? Just turn off your mute or maybe raise your hand a little bit, and we'll keep some sort of order here. Go ahead, Colette.
I just wondered if your family had any connections with the Merricks. Was there any kind of connection with Coral Gables?
My grandfather was not one on development. He was a disciple anyway, he even wasn't too happy with Flagler coming down here. When he arrived, my grandfather brought the first camera into this country and took all sorts of photos, which Arva used to her book. And there's still a lot more around. The University of Miami, we've given a bunch to. And so I don't think there really was much contact there, no.
I think we're so lucky that those photos exist and that he had the insight to record it the way things were at that time. And it's just so valuable that that those memories, in effect, on old glass plates, as I remember, it must have been a big box camera with the hood that you put over your head and stuff, right? Do you know?
yes.
Yes, there's lots of photographs of that. Some of that equipment is still at the Barnacle in one of the rooms there. But thanks to Arva, who developed a great friendship with my mother. My dad had already passed on then. And they got together and Arva got all sorts of information that my mother could pass on that she remembered from the years she was there and what she'd heard. So most of my stuff, what I saw when I was there, but some of it was passed down to me also.
And it was interesting that Arva talked about how your mother had protected stuff even from you kids and whatever. And I think that Arva must have been incredibly surprised and delighted to find all those negatives and all those photos, because as a historian and a publisher, that might have just sent her over the top, don't you think?
No, well, we knew that the glass plates were up there, but it sounded better as if they were discovered. So anyway, the attic, which was called the Garrett bin, was open originally when the building was a one-story building. And my grandfather jacked it up in about 1908 and built the second floor underneath it. So even there was a little room left, which my brother and I would crawl around in underneath when we were younger, yes. So.
More questions? Marlin.
One comment, you know, Arva was teaching high school history and went back to the University of Miami and met a man there. His name was Dr. Charlton
Tebow.
Tebow?
Tebow, yeah.
Tebow. And he became Arva's mentor and urged her to get a master's in history. And she wrote her thesis on Coconut Grove. And Dr. Tebow introduced her to Mary and Worth Monroe, and that's how she became so involved with the Barnacle. And those glass plates became what she wrote her first book on. The Forgotten Frontier is a collection of those glass plate negatives. And it really launched her career, which a lot of people kind of don't realize that Arva really started at the Barnacle and helped to save it.
Oh, definitely. She was the one that saved it.
Right.
Thanks to her friend, Adele, who was Bob Graham's wife. So they were buddies, and that's how that all got started. And Senator Graham pushed it through from there, which we're all thankful for.
Right.
Those connections were really critical, weren't they? And you know, one thing that I know you have some memories of, and you mentioned a little bit in the documentary. Right now, you know, the Biscayne Bay Yacht Club is almost a well-kept secret. You know, but that was a major social center back in the day when you were a kid. Will you talk a little about that?
Yes, my grandfather was one of the founding members of it. He and Kirk Monroe, who was a boys writer of boys' books, who lived in Coconut Grove, almost next door. And the two of them got together, and anyhow, they decided to have a regatta, as the story goes. And from that, they decided to have a yacht club. And as the club grew, there were lots of people came down from the north, New York and New England and so forth. Well-to-do people, and even into the Midwest, folks came down. So he had quite a collection of friends. Anyhow, they decided that they needed a clubhouse. So they first of all, before they had a clubhouse, my grandfather went over and rented the Cape Florida Lighthouse for 5 years or something like that. And after that, they decided to use the upstairs in the boathouse at the Barnacle, which was followed by the house they built just to the south of it on Piers, just south of the Barnacle. That house is still on Hardy Road in Coconut Grove and is for sale, or was. It is still there. But all sorts of well-known people came down, and a lot of them had big yachts and so forth. So they decided they needed a base downtown. And Mr. Flagler had volunteered to give some land along the waterfront where Biscayne Boulevard is now, was the beach before they filled all of that Bayfront Park area. And so they kept the big yachts anchored off of that. So and then we finally, when the boom, the bust came in 1926, they had to give up the building, the second building they had down there, rented from Flagler, to because they couldn't pay the rent anymore. The bank went bust, and the yacht club lost what treasury they did have, so they couldn't pay the bills. And so they got word that the club was, that Flagler was going to lock the doors on us. So there was a group of members got together, and with Commodore Hugh Matheson, had his barge that he serviced the coconut plantation on Key Biscayne with, and a bunch of friends stuck in there in the middle of the night up to the bulkhead, went into the building, took all the furniture out, put it on the barge, and took it and hid it up the river in the warehouse. That furniture is still at the Biscayne Bay Yacht Club upstairs, most of it.
Wow.
The heavy stuff has all been refurbished. But anyway.
That's a great story. The furniture is a wonderful memory with a little bit of skullduggery, huh?
Yes, yes.
And are you still frequenting the yacht club yourself? Do you go to lunch once in a while or dinner there?
Yes, it's a little hard now, but that's sort of my second home. I was almost born there. My parents were involved, my dad especially, in getting the dinghy races going. The Sunburn Regatta, he got people coming down from the north with shipping their dinghies down, either on the railroad cars or by ship into the port of Miami. And my mother and dad worked hard on that for him. And Hugh Matheson was Commodore at the time. And as a gift to my dad, I became a member at age 1 year. So I've been a member of the yacht club for over, counting my junior membership, for over 80 years. So anyway.
I think you set the record, didn't you?
I think so. I've been a member longer than anybody there. And my brother got it 2 years after that. So being 2 years younger. But I have a boat there that I designed and built, and I frequent there regularly. That's my second home.
It's wonderful that it still exists, and I hope it's in, you know, good enough shape and you have enough members. It seems like you have enough members there to keep it all going, and you really have some wonderful people there. Some people like yourself from old families, and some people that have come along as well that have seen the value in keeping that place going.
Well, the young folks have to come in, otherwise the place will die. So there are a lot of young folks that I don't know, and I have to ask my brother's boys and family who these young folks are, because my son's living in California and my daughter's living in Orlando. So anyway, but it's just a whole different world where every yacht club in Miami is a little different. So we try and stay the way we were, but we can't stay old forever. We got to keep going ahead.
It is different from the Coral Reef Yacht Club next door. I think there's a pretty big difference. It's so much
Yes,
more old school.
Our membership is much smaller.
Yeah.
And Coral Reef has a much larger membership, and they're more of a commercial yacht club, I feel. But Key Biscayne is a little different. You have to speak more Spanish in that club. And Miami Yacht Club is different than Coconut Grove Sailing Club. They're all a little different.
I had occasion to go and give a talk and a tasting on rums of the world to friends over there at the yacht club, and we had a wonderful time upstairs tasting rum and talking about the Navy and stuff, and it was really fun. And I got a real feeling that the people that are there really do love the camaraderie of their friends there.
That's true. Gee, I'm sorry I missed your evening talk on rum.
Well, we'll have to do it again.
All righty.
So more questions, Marlin.
I saw somebody comment that this film is often shown on PBS. This film is not the one that's shown on PBS. The production company that worked with me asked at the time if we could make a little side movie using some of the same shots. It's just a little bit different. It's more about Coconut Grove in the 1940s and 50s. And PBS, their programming often is not exact hours or half hours. They need little shorts to fill in spaces. And so there is a small film that has a lot of the exact, the same dialogue and some of the same scenes, but it's a little bit different. In fact, about 2 years ago, BIll Munroe called me and he said, Marlin, I came home last night and turned on television. And he said, there I was. And he said, I don't remember this movie at all. So so there is another one that you might see on PBS that has a lot of similarities. So.
And I wonder if, is it Bill Jr. out there in the palm tree land in California? You want to share some memories of growing up in the family? Turn off your mute or turn on your sound.
Turn on your mute.
Hello and welcome from sunny Southern California. I had the pleasure of living in the Barnacle as a young man, a kid. I would visit Miami every summer or several summers, and I would stay there with my dad and my grandma and my sister. And so it kind of was my house too, as I remember as a kid. I mean, I could certainly have stories of mowing the lawn and chasing my grandma's Doberman Pinscher up and down on its chain, and just having a lot of fun there as a kid with our relatives, and then making guava jelly, and a lot of those memories are some of my best favorite. So the Barnacle is very special to me as well.
I think making guava jelly is something that defined, our folks all around. If there was a big era of making guava jelly. My grandmother made, of course, the best guava jelly, but I'm sure your family made good guava jelly too. But that was something that was just such a big deal back then, wasn't it, Bill?
Some trees were good to make a jelly and some weren't. You had to pick the right ones. And some of them, my mother went out and found one that was quite large, and you cut it open like a peach and scooped out all the little seeds, and it had very thick meat in it. So, but then she'd, in the pantry there at the Barnacle, after she cooked it all down, she'd put it in this sack and hang it on the bowl that would have to filter its way through the cloth bag in order to make the jelly.
Yeah, but the smell of that guava jelly through the house for a weekend was something you never forget, right?
That's right.
I also remember very, very distinctly the life on the waterfront there down by the boathouse. And there was a working dock, and we had working boats, dinghies we could get on. And I tell people now, I was thrown in a little dinghy before I was thrown on a bicycle, because that was the way when I was a little kid. That was a life down there on the waterfront, climbing in the mangrove and playing in killing the scorpions in the second floor of the boathouse. Good memories.
Right.
Well, I'm here in Redland. I'm here at my guava farm in Redland. Let me show you
that's
all.
great.
These are my guava trees. I got several hundred guava trees, and within my recipes, I got the Housekeepers Club recipes that came from the Barnacle. So,
Good.
yeah, my name's Jorge Zaldivar, and I'm a guava farmer, holding up the legacy here for everyone.
Good.
So you mentioned guavas. You're going to hear from Jorge right away. So thanks for piping in there. That's good. Keeping it all alive, the old recipes and some of the old cultivars. You have quite a few, don't you?
Yeah, we're trying to figure it out, but it's just so much fun to connect these dots. And look at, you guys are talking about it, and I'm here at the farm. I had to tune in, but what an experience. And what who am I to say I'm going to keep this going, but I'm going to do it.
And we do enjoy when we're lucky enough to have live meetings that Jorge always brings some guava treats. And I think that half the people that come to our meetings just come for the guava treats, I'm pretty sure.
Thank you, Rob. So it was so much fun. I'm here at the farm. I'm going to keep working. I'll put my gloves back on. But I really wanted to show you all the trees so you could see Redland.
Where are you located in the Redlands?
This is just west of Chrome on 195 and 184. My humble little 2.5 acres, and just I'm collecting plants. I'm collecting plants from the Kampong, bringing them over here and collecting seeds, things that Dr. Fairchild planted. So I'm a little crazy. Okay, I'm having fun. This is really good stuff.
Do you have to bag your guavas to keep the worms out?
I make mostly preserves from them, so the worms don't bother me at all. I don't spend the labor, cook them in there and blend them out. And the point is the amount of labor and the amount of plastic that those that process incurs is something I just don't have the time for.
A lot of the trees at the Barnacle came from Dr. Fairchild, from Adelia Cahoon palms to bamboos to all sorts of plants. A lot of them have died and passed on. My dad even had a coffee tree growing there that he brought back from the Blue Mountains and Blue Mountain coffee in Jamaica during World War II. That Lignum vitae is still growing there.
And there's still a guava tree from last I checked.
Yes, there are a
There's
few.
one left, yeah, from what I found. But this is great. Thanks for sharing everything and letting me do my little guava thing over here.
Good. There
Oh,
is,
And yeah, you guys are gonna get it soon. Next time I see you, everyone's getting guava jam, okay?
yeah.
sounds good.
All right, any
All
more
right, everyone,
questions?
I'm putting my gloves back on.
More
Well,
questions
Bob
out
here,
there?
Bob Derez here. I just wanted to mention, I put it in chat, that the Commodore's camera can be seen in the baseball, the bottom floor of the Miami Museum, Miami Historical Museum by the main library downtown. There's a fine exhibit about the Commodore and the Barnacle down there, quite large. And the film, I believe, Marlin, can be seen currently on the Barnacles Society's website, thebarnacle.org. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I saw that up there recently, and I think that's wonderful. You know, the more people that have access to it, and you know, there's been, from what I saw last time I checked, a few hundred viewings of this documentary now, since it's been online for about a month or so.
People asked on Facebook where it could be seen, and I took a lot of me to not answer that question until today, so that people would come to the meeting today showing.
Well, I have a guava story. My mother got guavas when she was going to the University of Maryland from home. And her cousin teased her. He said that, yeah, those guavas, whenever the cats smell the guavas, they cover them up. That was the joke.
I get it. I can tell you this, when we were kids, you know, guavas, when they're really ripe, are kind of squishy, right? And I can tell you from experience, if you throw them at each other when you're a kid, they smash against your head like a rotten tomato and squish juicy, sweet junk all over you. And it's hard, you know, you have to get it out of your hair. It's an amazing fruit for a food fight, I can tell you.
Back in high school days, down at the boathouse at the Deering Estate, which is before they built the hospital, of course, it was sort of a gathering place. And there used to be gangs of kids would come down there, and invariably there'd be several bushels of rotten and sometimes into the green tomatoes brought in there for big tomato fights. What a mess that was.
Oh, agriculture, right?
Yes.
You know, kids are going to have fun with whatever they've got, right? So if it's tomatoes or guavas, you know, it's going to enter into the stories and the memories, right? So let's have some more questions about the documentary and/or the Barnacle. Anybody else have something?
I've got a question for Bill. What is one of your wildest, craziest memories as teenagers with you and Charlie? Did you get into lots of trouble at the park?
I don't know if I should tell you about that.
Yes, you should.
No. I don't know. I can't really recall any real problems that come to mind. Offhand, I don't recall, no. But I'm sure there were some.
Didn't you used to sneak out the windows?
Oh, that was my brother did that. When he got locked in his room for being bad. One day he snuck out the window, walked along the gutter. Why I didn't fall off, I don't know. Made it to the roof and escaped. But anyway.
Pauline, you have a question.
I was just wondering, I heard scorpions mentioned. Did you come across any other dangerous animals or other animals?
I don't think so, no. The scorpions we usually found in the wood piles and the wood sheds. There weren't that many. There were the big black, shiny green black ones were the worst kind. And then there were the little brown and black ones that were smaller. But they were rare. You hardly see them anymore. I don't know why. Too much concrete, I think.
Now, Bill, did you guys go to Coral Gables Elementary School?
No, I went to Merrick Demonstration School over by the old Coliseum, which is now a apartment and Publix. And we would all during the war, we carpool over there as my dad and some other folks were on their way out to 36th Street to their Pan American jobs. But yes, being a demonstration school, we didn't go to school on Monday, and we make up a half day on Saturday. So we did 4.5 days of elementary, but they had new ideas on how to read and so forth, which did not work for myself and several others, or many others, I should say. It was a sight recognition thing rather than phonics and so forth.
And that was located over by the Coliseum, wasn't it?
Yes, the back of it. During the war, Emory Riddle was working in their aviation things. And the first ramjet I ever heard, they opened up the big back doors, which were over our playground, and they fired that thing off. Boy, was it noisy. It was a ramjet.
And was that after the Coliseum wasn't being used again? Was it an empty property at the time?
I think they went ice skating after that. After the war, they made an ice skating rink out of it. I remember going there, spent most of my time with my legs spread, pushing water around the floor when I fell.
I'm curious, Bill, where you went to high school.
Oh, that's another story. It took more than one. I went to Ponce de Leon the last year. It was a high school for the 9th grade. And the next year we moved up to Coral Gables. The first year they were open as a sophomore. And I guess my folks figured my grades weren't too good. And I needed it. My brother and I we went to Ransom School. It was just starting up then, restarting. And so we went there. It was a reform school for me, which did help.
Well, thank goodness you're reformed.
But you see, I took advantage of that. In high school, as soon as, or any time in school growing up, I didn't stay around and play sports or join clubs or anything. I immediately migrated back to the waterfront for my boats. Either go pull my fish traps or bail out boats or go sailing or something. So even when I went to Ransom, quite often, I always sign up for the last class of the day. And I always, instead of football, I'd take sailing. So I worked with them and helped them. But I'd invariably take my dinghy over there. And as soon as I got for my class for the last of the day for sailing, I get my dinghy and go home and pull my fish traps or whatever.
And what about your first car?
First car. I guess it was Dad's 1941 Ford convertible.
Ooh.
That was I got that when I was going to the University of Miami. So, and we passed it around amongst friends, and it of course got shackles lowered and the chrome wiped off, and typical kids screwing up. So,
well, it sounds like you had a bit of a Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn existence there on the waterfront.
Oh, yes. And there were all sorts of people that gathered there, had their boats there. From Rob Collins, who was a well-known theater and church architect who had his office upstairs in the Coconut Grove Playhouse. He lived his office on the 2nd floor and he lived on the 3rd floor. But he had a catboat that was built at Miami Edison High School back in 1937, I think it was, which was there. So he'd walk across the road to the Barnacle to either go sailing or work on his boat, or people sit around and tell stories. There was a fireman, Burl Altman, who went to Miami High, played football. He grew up in Pahokee, Florida, up Lake Okeechobee. So he was never known by his real name. It was just Pahokee or Pahoke. He had fun. He'd help maintain the place at the Barnacle because we didn't have help. And he even built a little 24-foot sailboat in the boathouse. And I built a few little boats there. My dad built you saw my mom and dad in a blue sailboat in the movie. And she was built inside of that, in the downstairs in the Barnacle. She barely fit, but they got her out. But I enjoyed growing up with that boat when I was a kid. My dad would let us go into the Keys, with weekends with our stove, which is a couple of cans of sterno, and we'd catch fish and boil it because we couldn't fry it on sterno, or crawfish. But he let us loose in the Keys with that boat. She was shallow draft. But he said, don't ever go out in the Gulf Stream or try and go to the Bahamas in it, because she wasn't built for that. She's liable to come apart on you. So, but that's the way we grew up.
And do you
I have a
remember,
question.
what are your memories of Peacock Park? Do you remember when it became a public park?
It was always a public park in my lifetime, and I don't know when it changed. Mrs. Hugh Matheson, I remember, donated a lot of the coconut trees in it. It used to be full of Australian pines during World War II. I can still remember the Pan American Clippers, the Commodore planes they were using for training during the war. And they'd come in so low, it was before they built the breakwaters around Dinner Key. They'd come in so low that it seemed like they were dragging their bellies on their bottoms on the top of those Australian pines, but they cut them all down, thank goodness, and put it in the coconuts. But then they decided that the mangrove was sacred and they had to cover up the view with the mangroves. I think it's been overdone. That's the problem at the Barnacle too. It's going to completely cover up the boathouse if they keep letting it grow. I mean, it's beautiful, but it's got to be a limit. So that's my 2 cents.
Hi, can I ask a question?
Sure. Please.
Yes. Okay, so in some history books, it reads that Ava Munroe died on the banks of the Miami River and was tended to by Mary Brickle. Some others say that it was Mrs. Peacock. Can you correct that?
No, I can't. I don't know. I would guess it was it was probably Brickle. I would guess that.
Okay.
I don't. I may have been Peacock. I don't know.
I see Bob has his hand raised very politely. Bob.
Well, I had raised it before I talked the last time about the camera, but there is a drawing that was that was done of the mouth of the river, and where it shows the tents that the Commodore lived in with his first wife, and it mentions that she had just passed away shortly after that letter was sent up north. That map's available. I don't know whether I could, how I can make that available to you. I put it on Facebook, so it's floating around.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I really tried to do, as I lead tours, to make it as exact as possible. So thank you.
Was there a story about him driving her to a cemetery in Georgia or something when she died?
No, no way. There was no road in those days to get there.
Yeah, that makes no sense then. Okay, so.
No, he buried her up there, and it was later after he obtained the property there from Peacock's on McFarland that he moved her remains down to the grave that's there now, where it's next to the Coconut Grove Library.
Right. Okay. Hey, we're doing pretty well here. This is a lot of fun, isn't it? Reminiscing, and what a wonderful opportunity to have Bill with us here and Marlin talking about making this wonderful little documentary. So everybody remember to pass around that link to people, so they can see the documentary. I think it's wonderful to have this glimpse of the kids talking about growing up at the Barnacle. Any more questions? Lillian, did you have a question? No, Lillian's shaking her head. No. Okay, that's good.
I have some
but
other.
before you go, all of you, I want to tell you that as I work I consider myself a historian, although I don't have a degree in history, but I had some people with me on my last tour who were from the Northeast and said, I never thought there was any history in Miami because if you're from Philadelphia or Boston, there's so much more history. And I love to share the history. And I'm a daughter of the American Revolution. And and I've had people on my tours from Israel, or from Ireland, or from, there's so much more history to be told than there is in Miami. But they still come on the tours and love to understand the how much these people were such visionaries so thank you, and I continue to learn from you, and I love it, and I speak of it very highly, so thank you.
Bob here again. For authenticity, the letter and envelope, drawing an envelope, is with the Bruce Ball collection. It's dated February 9th of 1882. The letter is written by Addie Hewitt, who was the sister-in-law of Commodore Ralph Munroe, describing the life in early Miami. Tells of her sister Eva, the wife of the Commodore, being very ill. She died shortly after and is buried in front of the Coconut Grove Hotel. And it's very interesting.
I thought that the sister died on his trip back up north.
That's correct.
It doesn't say where, just that they were living in these tents right at the mouth of the river where the old hotel was. Very interesting.
Okay.
I think Marlin brought up an interesting point earlier, which comes back to what Aaron said, is that, yes, if you're the Egyptians, 5,000 years ago was the new era, and if you're from Boston or London, history goes back pretty far. But isn't it interesting that here we're talking to Bill Munroe, whose grandfather was an early pioneer. So local history here, you're 1 or 2 or 3 generations removed from the bravest people, these hardy people who against all odds came down here in Mosquito Land and were pioneers and stuck with it. I think I had read at one point that in 1910, 2/3 of all families that moved down here turned around and left because they were sort of sold a bill of goods. It's a fresh fruit growing on all the trees and it gets rid of your asthma, and then they found alligators and mosquitoes and no roads. And so it was really tough. But the point is that when 1 or 2 people and they have some memories of something their grandfather told them in this town, that's history.
Exactly, and I thank you for. I'm happy to have been to join the Miami Pioneers, and my friend is friends of Worth Munroe. I guess is the grandson, maybe your
Great
nephew, huh?
Bill's father.
He's my cousin.
He's around my friend Emerson. He's around my age, maybe 50, something like that.
That's Charlie's son. Charlie's son. Yes.
Okay. And it's just wonderful because I grew up in Miami Beach, and I was a children of the American Revolution. I knew some sort of history, but nothing until I became a tour guide. Didn't even know. My mother didn't even know the Barnacle. I don't even think she's been there. Anyway, it's a wonderful history, and I'm so grateful to your family for, you could have made so much more money by selling it to developers. And I just love everything. Coconut Grove, my mother, actually, when she moved here from Ecuador, she was 10 years old, and her mother, they moved into Coconut Grove. And her mother put her into school at the school across from the Biltmore, the church, the St. Teresa's, I think it was.
Yes.
Yeah. So she went there to school, and my grandmother was one of the they called them the gray ladies. She volunteered at the Biltmore when it was a hospital. My grandmother used to go read to the soldiers at the Biltmore. Do you know what I'm talking about? When it was a hospital.
Yeah, Lynn, do you want to add something?
Hello? Is
Yeah,
anyone there?
Lynn, you need to unmute yourself if you want to talk.
So my grandmother was one of the great ladies. Hello?
My family was here at that time too, and my grandmother on my dad's side was there at the opening of the Biltmore. Her name was Grant, and my father's name was Gretner, Charles Gretner, as in Gretner's for steak and all that stuff. It's in Miami, but my family's been here a long time too, and it was interesting to hear about that from them. It was neat.
So there's an example of 2 generations back, and you're back to pioneer history. Thanks, Lynn.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I can add, when the Biltmore was the VA hospital in the late 50s and 60s, my mother was a nurse on the pulmonary ward. No air conditioning. We didn't have air conditioning in our home in Coconut Grove, so we often walked down the marina in the evenings for the breezes down there. So I envied Bill living right on the water to have the breezes right there. We had to walk from Shipping Avenue, but Mom was not the least bit disappointed when they finally built a new VA hospital up by Jackson Memorial, because the Biltmore was really not destined to be a hospital. It's nice that they restored it to its grand old glory now.
Absolutely. And I remember when I was in high school, my family took me and my to the Biltmore, and we walked around and we looked at the pool. It was covered in leaves. It was abandoned. It was horrible. And it broke my heart to see it like that. Thank God it was restored.
Yeah, well, there's some really good-hearted people who put a lot into that. Marlin.
I want to say one thing about the Barnacle. Commodore Munroe was really very innovative in building that house. I have been there on the 2nd floor in the middle of the summer, and the way cross ventilation, but also there are, for those of you who have been in the house, just a series of pulleys that will open up the very top of that house and let all the hot air go out the top. I mean, don't you agree, Bill, that it was just a wonderful, and even the positioning of the house to catch the breezes.
Yes, being on the bayfront made the big difference, of course.
Right.
There were many large coconut trees and so forth in those days. It was a glimpse in one of the photos they did show earlier, but it was cool. Yes, he was very inventive about that. But he was a disciple of Henry David Thoreau, and he liked nature, and he wasn't at all happy with the building with Flagler or any of the developers that came in. So that's the way it was.
I think a lot of early pioneers would tell you that the magic word's the bay breeze. You built your house so that you got the bay breeze. And that was the saving grace of living in South Florida. You had the big porch and you had the ventilation. And as Bill said, sometimes they would sleep out there. And that was not at all uncommon on a hot night, maybe a kind of still night, you get a little bit of something out on the porch. I think that was pretty common. And also, we should remember that in the earliest days, there was no screening. Screening was another gift from heaven. Like you put screening up on your porch and then the mosquitoes couldn't eat you alive at dusk, So, but yeah, the bay breeze and the porches were such a gift, weren't they?
Yes. I now live on Mary Street in the lee of all these high-rise buildings, which completely cut off the sea breeze back in this area.
Right.
Yeah, but you can walk to the yacht club. So, that's good.
And to the Barnacle, 10-minute walk either way.
Now that reminds me, when you were a kid, was there just an awful lot of walking?
Yes, or our bicycles. Oh, we had bicycles everywhere. I'd ride over to go to school, grade school, on bike up McDonald. I'd be scared to death to take a bicycle up there today.
I know, right? The traffic and all, right? And did you ever bike down Old Cutler down to say Matheson hammock or something like that?
No, we usually went by boat
That makes more sense. Boat
to pick
people.
up girls in the basin there on the beach. Take them sailing.
Now we're getting some good stories.
Yeah.
All right.
I have a question. I hope this doesn't feed back because of you, Rob. I'll make it quick. Being involved in the Boy Scouts, there are a lot of Boy Scout projects, Eagle projects that were done there. Did they consult with you on some of those to get them, accurate historically? Like, for example, I know that they restored the boat ramp or the boathouse at one point.
Yes. I have not been involved with that. Maybe my brother had been, or his wife Mimi, I know, works with Girl Scout troops and so forth. So no, I haven't had any contact recently that I know of, remember.
I think primarily Katrina, the park manager, has handled a lot of the Boy Scout projects, because that's a question that I get asked often, and I always turn them over to Katrina. But there are endless projects that can be done at the Barnacle, even just working in the hammock and removing some of the exotic plants that they don't want there, to keep it authentic. So, but
most people are aware, but the live music has been such a hit, hasn't it? As far as getting people to come and enjoy the house. I think there's been a lot of people that first discovered the house, which is hidden in plain sight, right? On some of these live music events, would you say?
yes. The Barnacle Society, under normal conditions, I would say for about 9 months out of the year, would have a monthly concert and a moonlight concert. And it's just too warm and too many mosquitoes in the summer to do it. But if we have a good band, there can be lots and lots of people in the park. And it's a wonderful way to get people to come. And, I've always felt at the Barnacle, and we've also always tried to keep the prices very reasonable, because there was always a feeling to do how the Commodore would like to do it. I mean, not to have prices sky high like Fairchild could have, but to let families come and to just be very welcoming. All the history that I know about the Barnacle is that even the Native Americans that were around here, I guess we call them, were they Seminoles, Bill, that would come to the park?
Yes, in my grandfather's time, yeah.
Exactly. He was very welcoming, and I've heard stories that they would leave food on the windowsill, for the Seminoles to come, and it was so many pictures we have of people gathering on the lawn, and it was a very mixed crowd, which was nice to see.
Yes.
I would like to interject just for a moment. I've done a lot of research on the Brickles and Commodore Ralph Munroe, and in the era that we are in, it is wonderful to know how much they embraced the Indian people, the Bahamians, the Black people, what they had done. And I'm reading the Commodore story. These were people that they didn't see color. They didn't, of course, the Commodore was from the North, but in the era that we're in and everything that's happening, I hope that I would like, through my tours, for people to understand that Coconut Grove, before Miami was incorporated, was all, they didn't see color. They embraced the people from the Bahamas, the ex-slaves, the Indians. Everything was a sort of a utopia. And I try to tell people about that, because they were wonderful people until the Jim Crow laws came in and changed everything. do you have an opinion on that?
No, I don't. I really can't speak on that. It's my grandfather was I think loving to most everybody, and he welcomed them. And I think he was one of the few people that the Indians, the native Indians, trusted, and that's the reason he was so often
But
visited.
that's what I mean, that he was so wonderful.
Yes.
And he had been from Staten Island and down to Coconut Grove. So I was just, wondering. But I think your grandfather, it was wonderful. And that's what Coconut Grove was about originally.
That's a great point. And I see that John Palanchar is listening in. And John, of course, had given us a wonderful program. I think it was in September, wasn't it? On the Barnacle, and a lot of the history and some wonderful photos of when the hurricanes had come through and early boat building, and really gave us a wonderful presentation back in the fall. And I don't know if John's listening right now, but I just wanted to give a shout out to him for doing such an incredible job with that program. And it was very much appreciated by our members. We had quite a good turnout. So thanks for that, John.
Bob again. The Barnacle's currently having events. They had about last month a series of 4 short plays, and then the Solar Dogs played about 2 weeks ago.
And just Friday night, just this past Friday night, there was a concert too.
And next Friday, the 15th, they're limited to 50 people. It's it's pretty safe. I went to 2 of them. I have actually Bill's grandnephew, Charlie's nephew, as a grandson, is a wonderful jazz musician.
Connor Munroe.
Right, Connor, and his little group's going to be playing in a couple months. I'm hoping to get a ticket. I heard him at the Bose Art Festival 2 years ago. He did a solo piece. It was just, I was floored. He's just a talented. I believe he plays the trumpet.
Saxophone.
Saxophone.
Plays saxophone and clarinet. He plays several instruments.
I believe it's March 12th. He'll be at the Barnacle, as I recall. Don't count on it. But.
Well, that'll be wonderful. And that just brings up the fact that, the Barnacle is, right now, of course, it's COVID, but there's still a lot going on. And it remains a wonderful asset to the community. And that's all because of decisions made. I think somebody mentioned, Aaron, a good thing they didn't sell out, and they could have. And, and there's always a temptation to do that. Families that have been here a long time have something valuable. And, hooray and congratulations on that for all of us. Bill, thank you.
Yes.
I just want to say that I think there's a whole nother show I always have in the glass slides of photographs. There's been books and there's been some short pieces done on those glass slides, but I think there's a bigger story in the collection of photos that my great-grandfather took. And he had to make those he had to make those himself. He had to put the silver nitrate down. He had to make those glass slides to take those pictures. And I think there's a Ken Burns style story waiting there to be told.
I think you're right. What are the chances we'll get that story?
Here's
I've kicked it around. It's in a book, but I think there's a video. I think there's a PBS kind of story based. Basically, the book is the idea, but it's about the photographs. It's about the person and the photographer, and you're talking about him and his environment and what he was able to do. And he would send things up to the Smithsonian, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct, Dad?
Correct. Yes.
So he was a huge naturalist. And so I think all those trending things would make for a wonderful documentary that hasn't been really done yet. In its where you just look at all the photos. I mean, go through, not just cherry pick them, but look into each of them, you know?
Yeah, and him documenting it and being the naturalist, and then every photo is a bunch of clues, isn't it?
Yes.
You know, if you start really taking apart what's in every photo, identifying people and looking at the background.
In the style of Ken Burns, I think, where you have actors doing the voice of Ralph Monroe, and you have an actor doing the voice of some of the peacocks and the other people who were there at the time. I think that'd be I think it'd be something I'd love to see.
I think you're
Okay,
right.
I'm sorry to interject, but can you tell me that guy's name again? Ken what? Because I went to Cal State Long Beach with a man named Kenny Birdsall.
No, Ken Burns is
a well-known documentary maker.
Oh, okay.
Civil War and the rest of them.
You know, this was Arva's very first book. It's 230 photographs of the Commodores, and it was out of print. And when I was president, we had it was republished, and we had a book signing, and now it's out of print again. And I know that the Barnacle Society would love to. I'm not sure. I guess it would be through Arva's estate.
Marlin, excuse me, we have a lot of Forgotten Frontiers for sale at the Barnacle right now.
Oh, you do?
Interested?
Okay. Oh, I thought Katrina told me that this was out of print again.
Well, it is, but we still have several. So if
Okay.
anyone's interested in a copy, they're at the Barnacle.
Excellent.
I'd like to mention Sweet Pea and Marlin and their contribution to the Barnacle for the last 20, 30 years. And that I don't believe we would have what we have today if it wasn't for all the time and effort and
thank you.
Unbelievable. And I'd like to mention Lillian Walby, who's on the screen too for the last 10 years or so. How she's does so much work to keep the place alive. Thank you very much.
And you too, Bob. You were
Gosh,
there.
100%. I'm so impressed by the people that put so much effort into historical preservation. For people from the younger generation, I mean, this means a lot. And I don't know your name, but I can see your sort of Key West behind you. You
no,
with
that's just the background. Are you talking to me?
No, not you. The woman with the gray hair. So cute. I just love her. The woman who's got sort of the
gray hair.
You, yes, you. I just joined the Miami Pioneers. And it's just wonderful because people don't understand that there is a lot of history, but it's also, all right, it's not hundreds of years old, but I love every part of it. And these visionaries like Ralph Monroe or Mary Brickell, you know, it's really incredible. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing and how much you've done to preserve. Otherwise, it would just be like a concrete jungle.
We can all agree on that.
And the villagers, villagers need to be mentioned before.
Absolutely.
Villagers, yes.
And the contribution.
I do have a question on that because I strive to always, I've done so much research as far as to the FIU libraries and the Miami History Museum. So Coconut Grove was incorporated in 1919, but then annexed in 1925. So what happened there?
City of Miami wanted more money.
No, but what happened in 1919? I was it first I was told it was a village, then it was incorporated, then it was annexed. I mean, what's the real story?
Well, I know at some point the city of Miami moved their city hall and was looking for a temporary place, and the Pan Am building was available. That's probably not exactly related to 1919, no, but I know that.
But was it incorporated? Was Coconut Grove incorporated in
I think that was
1919?
1913, Rob. 1913 was that annexation.
No.
Into the
But
city of Miami, you mean?
Was Coconut Grove ever incorporated? So when you drive in through South Point, it says established 1873. It doesn't say incorporated. When was the city incorporated?
Can't tell you.
That date is actually the date of the post office from my research.
I know that. It's
Well,
And then
1873.
the incorporation, I believe it was never incorporated because it never became a municipality.
Correct.
That's just
what
my
I
rough
thought.
answer.
Well, the city
Okay, I
of
don't mean to,
Miami was founded.
interrupt you. I'm trying because I am so specific about everything that I do. The other day, the Miami History Museum released this thing about Coconut Grove, and it reads that it was incorporated in 1919 and then annexed in 1925. I knew it was annexed, but I didn't know it was incorporated, and I'm confused because when you drive through South Bayshore Drive, it says established 1873. Got that. What is the real truth?
Call Paul George.
Yes, call Paul.
But I don't want to. I want to ask. I know Paul George. I get it, but I want to know the real truth.
Well, he would tell you the truth.
There's a Miami History podcast. There's an episode on Coconut Grove.
I know that.
But
Okay,
there's an
but there
episode
are-
that deals with this topic very thoroughly, and I just heard it 2 weeks ago. Touches on a lot of
Okay.
things that'll give you great clues, and it mentions everyone that we've heard about today, really.
Yeah, and this won't
I
be
understand,
the
but
venue right here
apparently
now
there's
today.
no definitive answer.
This won't be the venue now here today to figure that answer out. I mean,
That's right.
we're talking about the early days of the Barnacle when the Bill grew up. But certainly, as a tour guide, you should find that definitive answer for yourself. But I don't know if we'll be able to give you that today. Let me share with everybody some information of upcoming programs, if I could, very quickly. Some Zoom meetings that we have scheduled so far. Coming up will be Charles Baker and Java Head. If anybody remembers, Charles Baker was a bon vivant world traveler who wrote several books, The Gentleman's Companion, about how to be a great host and cocktails and great food and traveling the world. And his place in Coral Gables on the waterway, Java Head, was world famous. And so we'll be talking about that coming up. We have Rennie Young, who some people might remember from early last year, gave a wonderful talk about Dinner Key that was extremely well done and very popular. Rennie's going to come back and do the Coconut Grove Sailing Club for us in March. Don Worth, I think many people in history know Don Worth and all of his work with local history and the Marine Stadium. Don, on April 11th, is going to talk to us about the Marine Stadium. I'm sure that would be a wonderful topic. And then May 2nd, we're going to come back to a program that we had scheduled that was ruined because of the COVID pandemic. And that is the ladies of Deering are going to give us a background and an update on their whole Flight into Egypt stained glass project, which was really a wonderful thing at the Charles Deering Estate. And then we've got coming up in June, there's a little part out here in South Dade called Aladdin City, which doesn't almost really exist. But at the time that Coral Gables and Hollywood were coming into fruition, there was a famous building company that was building homes in one day. And they had a little thing that they plotted out. It's Aladdin City. Like Opalaka, it was a whole Moroccan Arabian theme. And of course it faltered. But just like Sears, if you remember back then, you could buy a house from Sears and it would all show up on a truck or a train car, and then you'd put the house together. So Aladdin City is still there, but it's not there anymore. And we'll talk about that. And then I guess we've got Colleen, don't we, is going to give us, Colette, I'm sorry, the Coral Gables Merrick House in September. So we do have some good programming, set up for you, and we hope you'll tune in when you can and join us and interact as we. And of course, we'll be taking July and August off as normal for the Miami Pioneers and Natives of Dade. So anybody have anything they want to wrap up with? And I'll say thank you and goodbye to our friends. Anybody?
Well, I'd like to make a correction. It's actually originally called the Ralph Munroe Stadium. It's actually named after Commodore Munroe.
Okay.
Right.
It's a matter of authenticity.
Arva did have the plaque off, the bronze plaque off the stadium. I don't know where it is now.
Are we talking about the Orange Bowl?
No, the Marine Stadium.
Oh, I'm sorry. Marine, of course. Marine Stadium was originally named for the Commodore, huh? That makes sense.
Yes.
Yes.
Makes a lot of sense.
Like Burdine Stadium became the Orange Bowl.
Well, if Don doesn't bring it up, we'll have to remind him.
Okay.
So that'll be March 7th. No, I'm sorry, April 11th.
May. I thought you said.
Yeah, I'll if everybody's on the email list, I'll send you notes of all these updates.
And how do you get on the email list?
How do you get on the email list? Go to mpnod.org and you'll see it's very simple to sign up for the newsletter. And also you'll see there when we have programs finalized, they'll show up there as events on the mpnod.org website.
And may I give a donation?
Yes, when you go to the website, it's probably hard to miss the part that says, please give a donation. I mean, if we've done it right, you push a button and you send some money from PayPal or your favorite credit card and you become even a bigger friend of ours than you already were. Thank you, Bob.
Could you give the link for the documentary?
I'm sorry, say again?
Could you give the link for the documentary?
I did. It's in the chat. You know how to open the chat window? And I'll just say this, if the easiest way is to go to YouTube and search for the Barnacle, The Growing Up Years.
The Growing Up Years, okay.
Yes, and I think that it's very easy to find on YouTube now.
Okay, great, thank you.
And that delights me. Thank you, Rob. Thank you for doing that.
Oh, absolutely. It's such a pleasure. And all that hard work that went into that. And the more people that see it, the greater appreciation that is. And for all we know, YouTube will live longer than any of us. So maybe it'll stay out there. Maybe someday this will be the equivalent of what the Commodore did to document his world in his time and leave a little something behind for us. That's the best we could try to do, right? For the next generation. Leave a few clues, right? So thank you one and all. Thank you so much, Bill. Thank you, Bill Jr., for coming in from California. Thank you, everybody, for showing up today. We had a wonderful time. Marlin, thanks for having the idea and the concept and pulling it together. Thanks to the villagers for funding it. And let's give ourselves a hand. That was a wonderful program. Thank you guys all so much for what you do. And we'll see you next month with Charles Baker. Stay in touch. Get on the email list. Tell a friend. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
That was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marlin.